Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All My Best Friends Are Digital, a podcast about video games and the stories they tell. I'm one of your hosts, Caitlin Bailey, and I have with me my co-host, Mark Bigney. Mark, what is up? Are you ready to talk about video games?
You say another like it is some kind of burden or some sort of unending sequence. I think this is going to be one of our 75 best episodes yet.
Brilliant. I'm so excited to hear that.
I'm glad you're on board.
So, as always, we are going to start with talking about what we are currently playing. Then we are going to jump into our retro video game segment, gaming opinions on old school funware, what we call GOOF, with Street Fighter II Turbo, which is my Street Fighter II from back in the day. And then we will move on to our feature title, which is 1000xRESIST. And then we will do some shameless hyping of upcoming titles in our Shout segment. So Mark, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you've been playing lately?
All right, allow me to say two things, both of which are equally true. Number one, I would not remember the name of this game if it weren't written down in my notes. And number two, I am thoroughly enjoying it.
Okay.
It is called Space Mercenary Defense Force, which is simultaneously verbose and super generic. And it was one of those things that was sitting around on my wish list ever since it came out a couple years ago. And I didn't really, it had all the, the buzzwords that I tend to like, indie, action, roguelike, stuff like that. And it was relatively cheap and it was on the Steam sale for just a few bucks. So I decided to pick it up. I'm amazed that it doesn't have the word survivor in the title, because I thought that there was a memo that got circulated and that if you were going to do a survival style game, you put survivor in the title so that people knew what to expect.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that a whole bunch of deck builders started stuffing the word rogue in them to indicate that they had that kind of structure. This is absolutely a survivor type game where you are a spaceship and you're shooting at a whole bunch of different aliens. Now, all of this having been said, I'm not opposed to the survivor genre, but I have logged a certain number of hours, and sometimes even well-executed survivor games can be soporific. And I mean this literally. I can sometimes feel myself nodding off. When I'm just sitting there, it's like, I'm in minute 25. I can't really parse what's going on the screen. So allow me to emphasize how pleasantly surprised I was by Space Mercenary Defense Force. And if you are enthusiastic about the genre, whether you've been burned out recently on different iterations, I highly, highly recommend it. So, first of all, despite the fact that it's a super indie title, it's got a number of quality of life improvements that I very much appreciate when compared to a lot of other survivors. For one, the map is really good. It is functional and legible and indicates where there's experience point drop-offs, special encounters to be had, etc. So that's a welcome change of pace, because often any kind of map is notional at best. Sometimes there's some arrow saying, hey, something might be in this direction, without letting you know what it is, how to get there, etc., etc. Another thing that's great is that anytime you're offered an upgrade, it shows you all the upgrade trees that are associated with that particular upgrade.
Nice.
And so if you're getting a new kind of cannon, you get to see what the cannon evolves into and what special abilities it might acquire later on. And whenever you're getting an upgrade to a specific unit that you've already acquired, or a module, you know where you are in the upgrade tree and where the terminal point is and how many steps. This is marvelous.
That's beautiful.
The recharge bars associated with each module are also super legible. It's extraordinarily well done. I just realized midway through my second or third playthrough, it's like, oh, this is just presenting information in a really clean way, which is very much appreciated. It helps me make smarter decisions and let me control the visual chaos. And on top of that, of all the good quality of life stuff, I do think that Space Mercenary Defense Force made a number of solid design decisions. The visual chaos is satisfying, but nonetheless doesn't serve to obscure what's going on. In Vampire Survivors, in Halls of Torment, in even Karate Survivors, in a number of those other survivor-type games, ones that I've actually enjoyed, the visual chaos is kind of part of the point, but as a consequence, 15 minutes in, you cannot parse what's going on. Really. You know where your character is, you can kind of sort of make defensive moves, but you're just awash, and that's one of the reasons why the genre is sometimes called bullet heaven, because your attacks are just filling the entirety of the screen. I knew that something was up when I was playing Halls of Torment, because I initially wanted Halls of Torment to feel like a twin-stick shooter a little bit. But the problem is, you can't tell while you're aiming, because all of your attacks are generating so much visual noise that it becomes difficult to interpret your aiming as having any sort of consequence or effect, whether or not it does. So, The Space Mercenary Defense Force has a lot of really good variety. The boss encounters are really cool. It's got a whole bunch of weird weapons, so like you can get a railgun, but also you can get a birthday cake launcher that shoves out this birthday cake, which then explodes after a certain delay in a bunch of sparklies and little candle effects. The different ship designs are really cool. So, like, very often you have different classes or different elements in these survivor-type games, and all that does is change a very small starting thing, but by the end of it, you're drowning in so many upgrades that the initial differentiation is lost. In the context of Space Mercenary Defense Force, your modules will be oriented differently. Like, by and large, ships have 4 module slots, so you can't really get more than 4 core weapons. But how they're oriented matters a lot. For example, you might have a ship where you have 2 modules facing up and 2 modules facing down. You have no modules facing to the front or rear. That really influences how you're going to be moving your ship around. Your starting ship has very straightforwardly 1 module facing north, 1 east, 1 south, 1 west. There you go. But you can get into weird situations where there are broadsides. There's one ship which has only 3 modules, but they're all facing forward. It's a whole scene. And that's on top of all the other meta progression things that you can unlock with a sort of very straightforward and transparent currency system. So, getting back to the topic about visual noise, I also think that Space Mercenary Defense Force has calibrated the level of visual noise just about perfectly, because you do get the satisfying visual effect of all these different weapons chaining and triggering at the same time, but you nonetheless can see what is doing what, and therefore make intelligent moves about how to engage in things like evasive maneuvers and trying to... I say evasive maneuvers, your ship is pretty clumsy. It's pretty large and slow moving. There are upgrades around that. There are indeed upgrades that make your ship smaller, which is cool, because that's very handy, as well as increasing thrusters, all that stuff. On top of modules, there are a whole bunch of upgrades for other things. You know, the traditional ones like bigger radius for scooping in experience point upgrades, healing ones, etc., etc. You've got all the standard stuff and also some pretty weird stuff as well, which I very much appreciate. So I've been playing a lot of Space Mercenary Defense Force. Definitely when I saw that this was a survivor type game, my initial reaction was one of disappointment. I don't know if I just hadn't consumed enough media. Look, I'm a simple man. If something costs a couple bucks, I'm not going to be spending hours and hours researching the thing before I pull the trigger on a Steam sale.
Yeah.
My initial disappointment quickly gave way to delight. And I can't remember the last time I've been this enthusiastic about a survivor-type game, possibly since the original experience with Vampire Survivors. So I've been playing Space Mercenary Defense Force. I have not been feeling any kind of soporific pull, because you always have to be on your guard, because again, you get powerful and you get the sense that your weapons are getting better and you're doing much more damage, number go up and all those great things, but it is not the case that you get just overwhelmed with the sheer visual noise to the extent that you feel like your inputs don't matter anymore. Now, I still, every time I want to say what it's called, I have to look down at the notes because I cannot remember what this thing is called. It is called Space Mercenary Defense Force. There you go. It was designed and published by Tom Paradise, who does not have any other credits to, if that is indeed a real person's name. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was released in 2023. It was on the Steam sale. I've been having a great time with it. As I say, if you're inclined towards the genre, even if you're a little bit tired, give it a shot. It may appeal to you in the same way that it's been appealing to me.
Okay. It looks really neat. I'm looking at the Steam page right now. I have a couple of just random, like, gameplay-related questions.
Sock it to me, Caitlin.
You basically have 4 things that can be weapons, right? That get slotted, depending on your ship, I assume.
Yeah, with the default ship, with the starting ship, you have 4 modules pointing in the 4 cardinal directions. And after a game or 2, you can start unlocking new ships relatively easily, depending on how well you do. And they might have a different number of modules, and at a minimum, they will be oriented in different directions.
Okay. And then, is it like Vampire Survivors where you choose, like, you get an upgrade, like a weapon upgrade or whatever, and that's what you have for the game, like, you can't ever replace it?
I have not found a way to change a module upgrade.
Okay.
The other upgrades can stack effectively infinitely.
Yeah.
But the actual modules themselves, I've not found a way to replace a module that you have installed.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
I frankly would appreciate if there was some sort of like encounter or something where you could go and either re-aim a module because you socked it in the wrong slot, or even possibly remove it in favor of something else. Although, conceivably, if you're at the mid-game and you've got even a reasonably well-upgraded module, possibly the ability to replace it with a starting module might just be a trap.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe they tried it that way and maybe it doesn't work. But you do have to make your initial weapon decisions very carefully.
Cool. It looks really neat, and given that it is $250 US right now. And I mean, it's cheap to begin with. It's only $5. But yeah, I'm intrigued. I might have to check it out.
It doesn't reinvent the genre, like I say, but in terms of the variety that it has and the quality of life decisions that it has implemented, I think that Space Mercenary Defense Force has made a lot of really clever design elements. It is sufficiently well executed that it really made me curious about whether the credited designer had done anything else.
Yeah.
Because it shows an attention and craft that even a lot of other ones that I very much enjoyed, like Halls of Torment, like Karate Survivor, didn't show. And there were just a number of instances in my first couple playthroughs where Space Mercenary Defense Force did things. I'm like, oh, that's how you're doing it. That's clearly better than how a lot of the other games of this type do it. So that is part of why I'm so charmed by the game.
Nice.
So, Caitlin, what have you been up to?
Oh, so a while back, maybe about a year ago, I shouted out the game called Neva. It's by the same developer that did Grease or Gris. I already can't remember how we agreed that was going to be pronounced.
Okay, well, there was no agreement. It's just every time you say Grease, sure, I think of either Travolta or filth.
Yeah.
And it is the French word for gray. I don't know if I don't know anything about the game. I know the the sort of iconic image of that woman crying.
Yeah.
That is associated with the game. In French, it's gris.
Gris.
But I can't comment if that's what it's intended. I should really go and check up on the game.
Yeah, and it's
but
like
anyway.
a Spanish developer. But anyway, it's by that developer, and it's exactly what I thought it would be and exactly what I wanted, which is a platformer with a wolf friend. That's the most important part, obviously. And some light
I forgot about the wolf friend, of
puzzle
course.
and combat mixed in. It has beautiful environments, just like their previous game. The set pieces, an emotional story is told through the visuals, just like the previous game. There's not a lot of dialogue. I think the only dialogue I can think of is when your main character, Alba, calls the dog, or the wolf, because she just says Neva, so she calls her over. But anyway, you play as the character Alba. She's a woman who, in the opening cinematic of Neva, shares a traumatic event with a hybrid, like, wolf cub thing, and the wolf cub is named Neva. And
so the game is named after the wolf friend, of course it is.
It is, yes.
They know their audience.
They really do. Neva is separated into different parts, each labeled by a season, and each season has a handful of chapters within it. And Alba and Neva travel through their dying world, with each chapter having some light combat segments and light puzzle and platforming, bookended by a scene that shows how their relationship is changing and growing. It's apparently a pretty short game. Neva is supposed to take between 4 and 5 hours. It's likely one that I'm going to be finishing in the next week or two, the next time I sit down to play. But it's beautiful. I can't wait to feel all the feels. And yeah, you have a wolf friend, which is all I really need to love it.
Okay, let me be frank. I think you've picked up on this,
yes.
Caitlin. But I'm just going to state it explicitly, both for the benefit of viewers and to see if our relationship can withstand this test. All right?
Okay.
The presence of wolf friend makes me less, not more inclined to play a game. This is, as I said, this is one of the reasons why I didn't play Okami for all those years.
Yes.
Because I'm like, I don't want to play as a dog. I just don't.
I
don't dislike dogs.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't. In fact, your dogs have the ones that I've met.
Yes.
Have been peerless dogs. Big enthusiasm for your dogs. But
oh, good.
In the context of protagonists or anything not a big thing. Or the relationship between humans and animals, I recognize to be A, profound, but B, light on content, right? It's not the kind of narrative that I find engaging.
Yeah.
Right? A relationship between two people, there can be a lot of shared history there can be ideas, there can be conversations, there can be conceptualizations, there can be et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as much as I recognize that animals can have something akin to a personality, it's just the bond between human and animal, again, I recognize to be very profound. It's not necessarily something I want to talk about. It's not entirely unlike my attitudes towards people's spiritual experiences.
Sure.
Very profound, very difficult to put into words, not really interested in exploring it in verbal media. Anyway, all that having been said, the way you talk about how storytelling works in Neva sounds an awful lot like the way they did it in Ico. And Ico, I think, is one of the greatest works of storytelling in video games. And I know you didn't play as much Ico as I have, but do you think that this comparison is off base?
No. it sounds pretty accurate to me.
Then maybe I'll take a look.
I mean, part of it is probably like, it tugs at my heartstrings, being a person who has dogs and who has had pets, for her entire life. They also, like, I don't know, they share this traumatic experience together at the very beginning, and at that point, Neva is just like a little puppy, and you get to see Neva grow up through each of the seasons. Like, where I am, she seems like, at the very least, like a teenage, if not a young adult wolf dog thing. She's definitely not. She's definitely not the full size, but
I don't know why, but the human analog just strikes me as facially comical. Because just speaking blunt,
yeah,
isn't like a late teenage wolf dead? Like,
okay,
You mean adolescent, right?
Adolescent, yes,
wolf.
yes.
Okay.
But yeah, I like it. It's been fun, and I'm excited to play more.
I think some of these same ideas are going to come up again when we're talking about 1000xRESIST. But I'm very glad you've been enjoying Neva. I knew you were looking forward to it, and people loved GRI. I saw so many think pieces about how it was marvelous. But again, like the copy didn't really work for me, which is weird because I really like stories about trauma, and so I would probably super enjoy it if I gave it a chance, but just never have.
Yeah, it definitely... I was very interested in how they managed to tell a story about grief with just visuals. Like, you just get to watch. There's no dialogue whatsoever that I can think of. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, thinking back to some of the scenes that I found so arresting in Fireworks, a lot of those weren't really even dialogue driven anyway, so I could easily imagine GRI working on the same line. And then I could just look into it and try to figure out how they want you to pronounce it.
Yeah. Yes.
We could settle this once and for all. Is it Filthy Travolta, or is it French Canadian? Or some other third option, in which case we can both rag on the pronunciation.
Yeah, that's true. Anything is possible. Okay. With that, I think we can move on to our gaming opinions on old school funware, aka GOOF segment, where we are talking about the Super Nintendo Street Fighter II Turbo. Or at least it was Super Nintendo for me. It may not be Super Nintendo for you.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's complicated. I think this is going to be an interweaving narrative of both the personal and the historical. Why don't we start with your personal narrative, and why don't we start with the tragedy that has befallen you over the course of the past week?
Yeah, so I chose this version of Street Fighter II to play because it is the one that I own. And I was very excited to play it on my Super Nintendo, which I learned is a Super Nintendo Junior. Is that right? Is that what I decided it was called? It's not the Super Nintendo that most of us, I think, imagine when we think of the Super Nintendo when we were growing up, that had these rectangular purple power and reset buttons. This one had like an oval one. It's weird. It doesn't have a power light. But anyway, that's all aside. This is the version of the Super Nintendo I have. I don't even know where I got it. And it decided to die this week.
The saddest of trombones.
So sad. So I actually ended up playing Street Fighter II Turbo on my Inverna RG35XX. That's neither here nor there. I didn't actually get to play the cartridge that I own. But Street Fighter II Turbo was, I'm pretty sure, my introduction to Street Fighter. And it's certainly the version of Street Fighter II that I played the most. My twin sister and I were in 2nd grade when Street Fighter II Turbo came out. And we would play with our older brothers, who are, I think, around 10 to 13 years older. There's 2 of them, and they are not twins, so they are different ages, just to be clear. And because of the age difference and the skill difference that comes with, 2nd graders and, teenage boys, we played versus together a lot, but we would play with a handicap. So my sister and I would be playing, with the handicap all the way up, fully powered up, and they'd be playing super low. And that was most of my Street Fighter 2 experience back in the day. It was super fun. I remember how triumphant my brothers would feel when they did manage to beat my sister or I when we're playing, with the full handicap. It was very fun.
Sure. What was your favorite character?
Chun-Li.
Natch.
Street Fighter 2 Turbo is how I remember her looking versus the later versions of Chun-Li, where each of her thighs are basically their own character.
Her visual evolution has been weird. Starting with Street Fighter 3, they really leaned into proportions that don't look human.
Yeah.
And incredibly flowery animation that I think is meant to evoke Chinese martial arts. But that's a whole other area about how Japanese culture presents Chinese culture and Chinese people, but setting all that aside. So you were not alone in having strong associations of Street Fighter and Street Fighter 2 Turbo, because in a very real way, it was probably, this is going to be a very bracketed claim, but in a very real way, it is probably the best home port that the most people had access to. Because in the Super Nintendo, there was only one port of Street Fighter that followed it, and that was Super Street Fighter 2. But Super Street Fighter 2, when compared to Street Fighter 2 Turbo, is not nearly as well balanced, not nearly as well honed. And furthermore, it got released relatively late in the console's life cycle, and by that point, many people had moved on, both in terms of fighting game franchises and in terms of consoles. And so the definitive version of Street Fighter 2 that is still played to this day in terms of tournaments and so forth is Super Turbo, which did not receive a domestic Super Nintendo port. In point of fact, the only domestic port for a while was the 3DO port, so you can imagine how many people played that.
Okay.
Anyway, backing all the way up, the abbreviated timeline, for those of you who don't know, is as follows. 1987 was Street Fighter. There were actually two versions of it. Do you know about the two arcade versions of Street Fighter?
No, I don't.
So one of them was the traditional 6-button layout that we know today, 3 punches, 3 kicks. There was also a kind of novelty version, which arcade owners hated because they kept breaking down, that only had 2 buttons, one for punch, one for kick, and the strength of the attack was how hard you hit the button.
Oh, no.
So people wailing on these. Anyway. Street Fighter was very successful, despite the fact that it was not good. It's one of those things where, and this is definitely true of Street Fighter, and also true of the first Street Fighter 2, it's difficult to be both pioneering and polished. These are very difficult things to do. And this is an analogy that'll make zero sense to most people, but as somebody who studies the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, he pioneered a whole bunch of things, and consequently, it's very difficult to grapple with what he was doing, because he was basically using the old set of vocabulary to define a new set of endeavor, and to a certain extent, pioneering video games and works of culture are very much the same way. You're forced to use the last generation's tools while effectively making the next generation, and it can get very, very awkward. As an example of this, in 1991, Street Fighter II: The World Warrior, which has basically started this whole nonsense, it invented combos by accident.
What?
It was entirely unintentional. It was basically a glitch that they decided to leave in. And so something as fundamental to fighting games as combos is largely a quirk or an artifact of unintended design consequences.
That's delightful.
The balance was all over the place. The damage scaling was wild. It did a whole bunch of weird things. And this is on top of other actual game-breaking glitches, of which there were legion. But nonetheless, it prompted an entire global phenomenon. Followed up in 92 by Champion Edition, brought in the four boss characters as being playable, rebalanced a whole bunch of things, but it was still not particularly well balanced. Then there was Turbo in 92, which in many ways was one of the better balanced versions. It upped the speed, and it just gave a balance pass to everybody, because Champion Edition let you play as the bosses, but they were not particularly well fleshed out as characters were. And it still maintained a lot of the other balance problems. Anyway, then there was 93, and Super introduced 4 new characters and introduced a whole bunch of new balance problems. And then Super Turbo in 94, which kind of, again, another round of balancing, introduced ultra combos for the first time, special meter bars. First time in Street Fighter, not first time ever, just as a note. This did not end the franchise, however, even in the context of Street Fighter 2. I mean, I'm not even touching 3 or Alpha or any of the other things or whatever. This is what led to the joke about how Capcom couldn't count to 3, because it did all of these things, and then after doing all these things, it then went to Alpha before it even did Street Fighter 3, and then no one liked Street Fighter 3 until Third Strike. But setting all that aside, 2003 saw Hyper Street Fighter 2, 2008 saw Super Street Fighter 2 HD Remix, and then 2017 saw Ultra Street Fighter 2. It's a whole thing.
Oh.
The 1993 Super Nintendo port of Turbo sold a gajillion copies, because this was simultaneously the height of Street Fighter's fame and a very solid iteration on the formula. And so a lot of people like you, this is the version that they played a lot with. For some people, it's super. Not a whole lot of people, it's Super Turbo. But anyway, the prevalence of the home port means you're not alone. And I played the crap out of Super Turbo on the Super Nintendo. And indeed, it was roughly at this era, the last dying gasp of Street Fighter being a 12-character game, where I was briefly, for one hot second, tournament competitive. Pre-esports, pre-online play, when it was just a whole bunch of people in a dark arcade and you'd line up your quarters on a cabinet. For a brief period, I was that guy at the cabinet who would stay there beating all comers. That was me for a brief moment.
Nice.
And then I could feel the meta was moving to where I didn't want it to go.
Yeah.
It's the same story me with a lot of things where I'm briefly competitive. Then the meta shifts because they release the new version or whatever. I'm like, oh, this means I have to relearn everything again.
Yeah.
Nah.
I don't want to do that.
Nerds to that. That end, I could feel myself getting slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's very weird because your neurological responses actually start getting slower very, very young in life. And maybe it was psychosomatic. Maybe I'm making it up. But I could find myself increasingly in situations where it's like, I know exactly what I need to do. Oh, the moment's passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, man. You know, it was really funny to me hearing you list out all of the different versions of Street Fighter 2. Because I think, okay, in a modern era, if Street Fighter 2 came out today, a lot of those would probably just be patches, especially just, oh, yeah, it's basically the same, except they balanced everything and they added, like, a new character.
Yeah, 100%.
So, you know, buying a new game was the DLC of the 90s, I guess.
Completely. And the analogy isn't even much of an analogy because Street Fighter 2 Turbo was a patch of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. It was literally something that you put on the board.
Yeah.
You didn't even buy a new board. It was literally a patch of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. Well, it was also, historically, we could get into the whole detail, it was also a response to a whole bunch of what would now be called ROM hacks, of fan-made alterations to Street Fighter 2 that would do a whole bunch of wild things. As somebody who was in the arcades at this time, I saw a bunch of them. The most famous version was called Rainbow Edition, which was truly wild. A very common modification was to allow people to do super moves in midair, to mess with the speed of fireballs, to do a whole bunch of other weird stuff.
So would arcades install though? Like, how does that work?
Well, you just mess with arcade boards. You fiddle around with the programming the same way you do a ROM hack now. Well, not the same way, but the same principle. And you mess around with it and alter Capcom CPS-1 arcade board, and there you go.
Okay, so like an actual arcade would go and do that, and then people could like play that modded version?
Well, the actual people involved in doing the modification, I couldn't tell you.
Oh, sure.
But it was all just part of the general arcade scene. It was the Wild West, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Things... Like, I distinctly remember the period when I first started playing Street Fighter 2, the original one, before Champion Edition came out, and not knowing what the special moves were. It was secret hidden knowledge.
Yeah.
Exchanged between greasy pre-teenagers and a whole bunch of other stuff. It was a whole scene. So, going back to Street Fighter 2 Turbo, what did you think?
So, I mean, it's just pure nostalgia at this point for me. I did not have the opportunity to play any verses in this last week. I tried to get my daughter to play with me, but she didn't feel like it. And my spouse and I can become very competitive very quickly. So we decided not to do that. But I love Street Fighter 2 Turbo so much. I get to see like Chun-Li doing cool stuff. Dhalsim doing like the like gross stretchy limb stuff. It's just I don't know, everything about it. Blanca's design, like I love all of it. I love it so much, and it's hard to put into words because it's 90% nostalgia at this point, but that is what it is.
So I played the arcade version. I didn't reload the Super Nintendo version because it's weird. Back when I was playing the port at home, I honestly didn't notice 90% of the dropped assets or changed animation or dumbed down visual elements effectively.
Yeah.
But now I don't know if it's just contemporary technology or the fact that I'm not playing on a CRT with its inherent blurriness, I can't go back to the Nintendo ports. I just really can't. They were, for the day, incredibly technically impressive. Marvelous feats of engineering, and they deserved to sell a hojillion copies at the time. But now, as it stands, I just can't watch people do their movements and know that there's so many dropped frames everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they just couldn't copy over the assets. And it's weird. I think the cast, as iconic as they are, I do not have the same enthusiasm for the Street Fighter cast that I now have for like the SNK cast.
Right.
You know, give me a King of Fighters, give me a Fatal Fury. Those are the characters that for me are the iconic video game characters of the 90s. And that's just, I'm an SNK fanboy. What do you want?
Yeah.
And I still have a lot of affection for Sagat.
Mm-hmm.
Sagat is one of the first video game characters that had a character arc, and I will always love him for it. I'm a sucker for a redemption story.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he works for the bad guys, but he's not a bad guy? Wow. And it's weird because storytelling in video games, especially the 90s, was a whole thing. Mm-hmm. Storytelling in fighting games is a whole nother thing. Like, it is amazing to me that fighting games, even to this day, can have hours and hours and hours of lore that are just hinted at in, like, win quotes and weird side things that are untranslated.
Yes.
You then have to piece together through reading the officially sanctioned manga, and you watch the 3-hour YouTube video trying to tie it all together. This, that, and the other. But it is amazing to me, and I'm just going to get so much hate mail for this, I know it, that the lead character for Street Fighter is a guy who likes to fight. That's his thing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's his story. That's his character arc. And the whole thing, part of this is just how boring Ryu is, but also part of this is how incredibly sloppy Street Fighter V was in a number of ways. His whole thing was there's this weird energy called the Dark Hado, where he like gets tempted into evil, kind of, sort of, but not really. It's not really evil. It's not really moral, but it's nonetheless, it's so confused. Metaphysically, it's confused. But setting all that aside, so his entire character arc over, like, definitely Street Fighters 4 and 5, and implied over much of Alpha, and even implied a little bit in 3, is struggling with this dark force within him. Mm-hmm. In Street Fighter 5, he conquers it off screen. Nice. I'm not joking. I'm uncharitable to Street Fighter in a lot of ways, but it's literally the case that there's a scene where, again, he talks about, I really need to master this thing, and everyone's like, yeah, dude, you do you. And then he comes back later, and he's like, I've done the thing.
What possessed
I'm all
them?
over that now. Tick it off the box. It's off the checklist. I'm cool with it now.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, sure, fine. This is what counts as storytelling. All right.
That is so unbelievably silly. Like,
yeah, Street Fighter V alienated a lot of people. I mean, I just take it as part and parcel of how boring Ryu has always been. Mm-hmm. But whatever.
Yeah.
Like, sooner or later, Chun-Li's, I think, is going to have to get over the fact that Bison killed her father.
Yeah. How long has it been?
The story of Street Fighter 2 is that Bison went out and systematically alienated the most powerful fighters on Earth. And then he held a tournament so they could come wail on him for a while.
Yeah.
And they haven't really moved past that much. It's still just mostly a whole bunch of people really mad at Bison. Anyway.
I take it the SNK games have moved beyond whatever the first SNK game was about.
Well, they have and they haven't. I mean, to a certain extent, it's a little bit like Marvel Comics in that no one ever really dies and they keep bringing people back because they're popular enough.
Sure, yeah.
Like, people have been trying to fight Rugal Bernstein forever, and he died in King of Fighters 1996. So, there's that.
Yeah.
And Orochi has been coming back forever. It's a whole thing, but nonetheless, just because the cast is so much bigger and the hero keeps changing, mm-hmm. there's nonetheless a kind of forward impetus to keeping things developing.
Yeah. Versus a new Street Fighter, where it's like, all right, Chun-Li's head is smaller, her legs are bigger, and she's still mad about her father's death. Let's go.
It's true. Yes, but all that having been said, I agree with you. Street Fighter 2 Turbo is one of the solid entries. No real slight on the 4 characters they introduced in Super, which is to say Fei Long, T-Hawk, Cammy, and DJ.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't really like them as much as the core cast. And Super Turbo is also a little fraught because it took them a while for there to be good home ports, and the arcade version, another little bit of Street Fighter trivia unasked for here, the arcade version is bugged so that the difficulty is wildly too difficult, and you cannot reduce it down.
Oh.
Yeah, so playing the arcade version single player is not a good scene.
Okay.
You can do it, but it's asking for trouble.
Yeah, so that's just going to eat all your quarters.
More or less. I mean, obviously there are people who can beat the game without taking
Of course.
hit. Obviously, like there are these masters out there, but
Yeah.
Even as somebody who was pretty good at Street Fighter at various times in my life, I've never found arcade mode of Super Turbo in the American version to be a good time. The Japanese version is unburdened by this particular glitch.
Oh,
for what
nice.
it's worth.
Okay.
I think we need to stop talking about Street Fighter. I could talk about fighting games all day.
All right. With that, we will take a short break for some ads, and then we'll be back to talk about 1000xRESIST. And we're back. All right, so we are going to be talking about our feature title, 1000xRESIST. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
So 1000xRESIST was developed during the pandemic, which is incredibly obvious from everything in the game.
Yeah.
It was developed by a small Vancouver team with some assistance from the Canadian government. So this is your CanCon for the week. Called Sunset Visitor. It was released in 2024 and has been nominated for a very long list of video game adjacent awards, including a Peabody Award, which it won. And I can absolutely see why that's the case. It is... So classifying it in a genre is kind of difficult, right?
Yeah.
When I first loaded up 1000xRESIST, I thought it was going to be a game... This is sort of a neologism, this classification of game that I call the just enough game. The game that is an action-adventure because there's just enough action or just enough adventure to prevent it from being something else. The paradigmatic example of this that we've talked about, I think, is Hellblade.
Yeah.
Hellblade gets to be an action-adventure game because there's just enough other stuff that you're doing. There's not walking around and having scenes presented to you. Then there are more classical walking simulators, almost always first-person, and often relating to logs or other things. And we've talked about Still Wakes the Deep, which I think is not exactly the paradigmatic example of a walking simulator, but it's close enough. And then there are graphic adventure games, which are kind of like walking sims, but kind of different in terms of perspective. Mm-hmm. So the Telltale games, Fireworks was like this. I don't know where I'd slap 1000xRESIST. I don't think it belongs in that first category of the just enough game. I thought it was going to be just enough. Like the first hour or so, you're told how to jump through time. Mm-hmm. More on this later when we start talking about the narrative of the game, because there's not a whole lot we can say without getting into spoilers. You're shown how to... It's kind of a grapple hook mechanism, kind of, sort of. I'm like, oh, okay, these are the things they put in to make me solve a puzzle or two to break up the flow of dialogue.
Yeah.
Fine, cool. This is a just enough game. I've played enough of this. Those tools are almost never used in a substantive way ever again. They're there a little bit, but mostly in a perfunctory way. So I'm like, oh, okay, so this isn't a just enough game. This is more of like a walking sim graphic adventure game thing, but kind of like neither, because it's third-person perspective, and there's no even ostensible puzzles or inventory management. Anyway, it's a story.
Yeah.
1000xRESIST is a story.
Yep, absolutely.
That is all I can say about it. Does that seem like a fair characterization of a genre?
Absolutely. I mean, it has a story to tell, and it tells it, and you occasionally do some stuff around all of the storytelling.
Yeah. So 1000xRESIST is the story of Watcher, and it starts very much in medias res.
Yep.
With Watcher doing a very controversial thing, and then it backs up a bit, trying to show you why Watcher did what they did. And it is an all-female society of individuals who seem to be they have a ruling class, more or less.
Yes.
People who satisfy particular roles. There's the principal, there's Watcher, there's Bang Bang Fire, wonderful name, wonderful character. There's Fixer, Healer, and Knower. It's weird. So they have Principal, Watcher, Healer, Knower, Fixer, and then they're like, okay, what's next? Firer? No, that's a little awkward.
Yeah.
Banger? No, that might mislead people. What about Bang Bang Fire? Okay, nailed it. Move on.
Yeah, nailed it.
So they live in a kind of cultish devotion to the All-Mother. By the way, Heki Almo's sister.
Heki Almo. Hair
to hair. And you are not given the sort of background exposition as to why the society looks this way. Mm-hmm. It is definitely the near or far future. Everyone's wearing these weird skin-tight futuristic outfits in bright colors, so that's how you know that it's the future. And parenthetically, I want to give minor props to the fact that it's an all-female cast. Well, there's one male character, kind of, sort of, almost. Maybe a couple, by implication. And they're all wearing skin-tight suits, and at no point did I ever perceive any sexiness anywhere, so kudos to that. It can be done.
What?
And it's weird, because most of the time I hate stories like this. You're almost always confused about something that's going on.
Yes.
because they don't explain any of this stuff, certainly not explicitly, certainly not at the beginning. But nonetheless, this I think was the first inkling that I had that 1000xRESIST was operating on a different level than most stories of its ilk. Because I never felt like the confusion was standing in the way of my appreciating the thematic elements that they were playing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always felt that I was getting all of the story, even when I didn't understand all the details.
Yeah, like you get a dialogue option. It's like, okay, you can say 6-1, hair to hair, or this other thing. And I'm like, excuse me? But you just pick one. You just have to pick one. You don't know what it means. It's fine. And the story moves on, and over time, you kind of start to learn what all these things mean. But yeah, you're right. It never stops you from enjoying what you're doing and figuring stuff out as you go along.
Yeah, it's all show, don't tell. And sometimes they're going to show you soonish, and sometimes they're going to wait until the last hour of the game to show you what was going on. So, nominally, it's a post-apocalyptic science fiction story about aliens and a plague. That's kind of true. It's also not true. It's also kind of a story about faith. It's also kind of a story about memory. It's weird. Like, I remember when criticizing Hellblade 2, I said, okay, here are the themes that Hellblade 2 talks about. And I leveraged that as a criticism. This is a 8-ish hour game. It is playing with live ammo, and it cannot give enough substance to really any of these ideas that it's playing around with. I feel like the list of themes that 1000xRESIST is dealing with is almost as long or longer.
Yeah.
And yet it did all of them very well. And in point of fact, I can't even list half of them without engaging in very serious spoilers.
Yeah.
Because some of the themes that it deals with very well are shocking. In that I would not have expected. Again, you get this basic framework, this weird science fiction stuff, and people are talking weird and everything. It's like, okay, fine. And then it takes this weird left turn into very grounded, very relatable storytelling elements. And like, I can't believe I'm playing the same game, and it's pulling this off too.
Yeah, when I first saw 1000xRESIST, I thought I was gonna get like sexy sci-fi girl shooting laser guns. Like, I don't know. I didn't get anything what I expected, honestly.
Yeah, when there was one kind of sort of action scene near the end, I was appalled. Not appalled, I was just like, oh, wow, all right. Because this actually is, okay, this is a bit of a criticism. This is the one time where I was a little bit confused and I didn't know whether the game was doing this deliberately. In 1000xRESIST, it's super low budget. People do not move their mouths when they talk.
Yes.
Much of the time, they get around this because everyone is wearing a very heavy respirator mask. Again, plague. Done during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's not subtle. That's fine. So Fixer, for example, who's one of the main characters early on, when she speaks, her mouth doesn't move because it's obscured by a heavy mask. Fine. Cool. Healer, same deal. Knower, same deal. Watcher, on the other hand, she has a sort of a transparent face mask.
Yeah.
And her lips don't move. I'm like, okay, is there telepathy going on? Is she making noise? Is she actually talking at all?
Yeah.
So that was one area of confusion that I felt was unnecessary, and that was because of the like sort of technical / budgetary limitations of 1000xRESIST.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the time, the fact that the animation is not very good is not a problem. But there I felt it was a bit of a problem.
Yeah, there were a number of times I would be having a conversation which I thought might have been between at least 3 people, and I could not tell at any point who the heck was talking. Like, okay, the main character, I think, has different color text. So you can tell, like, each of the main, like, 6 sisters have their own color text, I believe. But the others, nope. Good luck figuring out who's talking, because no one's mouth moves.
That having been said, with respect to the dialogue, it is extraordinarily well written.
Mm-hmm.
It is simultaneously human and bizarre. Like, even when I don't understand their cant, even when I don't even understand the context in which they're talking, it doesn't sound like other science fiction stories. Mm-hmm. It sounds like people talking. Like, Bang Bang Fire, for example, quickly abandons pretenses towards being comprehensible and speaks in either jokes or riddles or things that make only sense to her very quickly.
Knock, knock.
But nonetheless, it doesn't sound like this pretentious, self-conscious dialogue that you often find in even good science fiction.
Yeah.
When people are talking in Dune, there's a certain kind of theatrical ostentation. No, I mean it.
No, you're right.
Like, it doesn't matter who they are. They could be like the lowest of the Fremen or whatever, but it sounds like I am intoning in science fiction terms. These are people in a very weird context that I may or may not understand, but they sound like people. Yeah. And I loved it.
I was so impressed by the writing and the storytelling in 1000xRESIST. Like, at the very beginning, I didn't really know what was going on. I was a little confused. I wasn't so sure about the game. They introduced the quasi, like, time traveling mechanic. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then seeing how they were telling the story through you traveling, like, to all these different days, I just thought was amazing. I was just so pleasantly surprised by 1000xRESIST because it was not at all what I was expecting, and that was actually a really good thing.
I don't know what I was expecting, but I certainly, again, like, I can't even say what some of the themes that I most love because they are tremendous spoilers.
Yeah.
And this is very clearly a very personal project on the part of the dev team. The dev team consists of a lot of members of the East Asian diaspora in Vancouver, which is hardly surprising. Part of the story kind of sort of takes place in Vancouver, kind of not. It's weird. Again, I can't go into details without spoiling much, but just the voice acting is so well done. It's so naturalistic. It leads into this sort of naturalistic delivery. There was only one delivery of voice lines where I thought, I think this person belongs in a different game. And so for the rest of the time, it was just perfect. I loved Secretary's voice actor. It was wonderful and strange and kind of cute and otherworldly all at the same time. Secretary was, I think, my favorite performance, and it's just extraordinarily well done. And like, a lot of things that was playing with are going to sit with me for a while. It's weird. I wasn't emotionally moved as much as I have been in other stories, I think, that were similar caliber. Like, for example, I've talked about this before. I think for the last, 2 hours of The Walking Dead Season 1, I was just ugly crying the entire time.
Yeah.
I cry easily when it comes to stories that I'm really taking seriously.
Yeah.
And there were only a couple moments in 1000xRESIST where I felt similarly emotionally moved. And I think part of that is just how weird everything is. So for much of the story, I was more satisfied and appreciative than moved. Which is not a criticism, it's just a different tone.
Yeah.
Right? Nonetheless, the cast was very, very human, as I say. I love Bang Bang Fire. Healer, near the end of the game, made a surprising push for being my favorite. I thought she was great too. But they were all really cool. My only real criticism is I think that the first half of 1000xRESIST was vastly better than the second half.
So I'm not particularly far into the second half yet. I was actually, I gotta say, leaving out why I felt that way. I actually thought that 1000xRESIST ended at that midpoint. I was like, oh, that's it? It's over? I thought there's all this other stuff. No. But, yeah.
I only knew that it hadn't ended. Yeah, it pulls a fake out on you. I only knew it hadn't ended because I'd looked up in advance how many chapters there are.
Oh, okay. I didn't even notice how many chapters there were. But, yeah.
It's perhaps inevitable when, as I say, there's a long list of really interesting themes that it grapples with. You're going to prefer some themes as opposed to others. And it's just, I liked the themes of the first half a little bit more than the themes of the second half, which is fine. I nonetheless felt driven to play it all through the end, and I didn't feel like it ever dragged, with perhaps one exception, and that is getting lost in the garden.
Okay.
Have you been getting lost in the garden?
Yes. The map, okay. The map is really funny because it looks like it was drawn by an 8-year-old. And apparently that's the Allmother's art, I guess. And it's wild. Like, the map is not very good. I can never, because you can't tell what direction your character is facing. So I would be facing a direction, open up the map, and be like, okay, I am pretty sure I'm facing south. I was not facing south. Yeah, I got lost in there so often. And I never felt like I was able to spend enough time in there to really get to know my way around.
Part of it is clearly an excuse to make you wander around and interact with people by accident.
Yeah.
And sure, that's fine. And indeed, you've written all the NPCs so well and the dialogue is so well delivered. I'm happy with that. But then I'm still lost and I still don't know where to go. And I've heard them talk. And now I just need to go to the next checkpoint, please.
Yes.
And at that point, I eventually muddled my way through, and by the third, fourth, fifth time, you're expected to wander around in the garden to go to a specific place. I could vaguely remember where to go. All told, I don't know how I would have changed it, but you're given 2 tools to navigate the garden. One of them is a map drawn in pencil crayon, and another is a series of checkpoints that can be illuminated if you hold a shoulder button, and frankly, neither of them are good enough for the job.
No, the shoulder button one is so weird, too, because you can kind of look around and see roughly where people are. But there was one instance when I was playing yesterday where I was trying to find 4 people all in a group, and I swear I just did circles around it for a while before I realized what I was supposed to do.
Yep, that's 1000xRESIST.
Yep.
I said this before. Unlike you, I didn't have a strong preconception of what this was going to be like.
Yeah.
And even just over the course of the past year, I've played a number of games where people talk about how the story is so memorable, even if you don't enjoy the gameplay, the story will keep you through, and I've bounced off of them.
Yeah.
Pretty hard. But 1000xRESIST won me over almost immediately with how confident and competent it was at dealing with some of these heavy ideas. And it struck so many brilliant balances that could have been alienating in a lesser well-done game. Mm-hmm. And I can recommend it without reservation whatsoever. I think 1000xRESIST deserves all of the plaudits. Yep. It deserves the Peabody Award. It was nominated for Hugo. I think it should win the Hugo Award. It's that good. An amazing experience that, frankly, I wish I'd done sooner.
Yeah, I had never even heard of 1000xRESIST before you brought it up. I think you said a patron had recommended it.
Yeah, it was recommended by a listener.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, that's so cool. Like, I can't believe that I hadn't heard of it. And it is, you can tell that it was developed by a small team. There are some things that are a little bit janky, but it doesn't matter at all. Like, the story is so good, and so it told so interestingly. Like, I was sold very quickly.
So that's 1000xRESIST. Go try it.
Yeah, you should. You should definitely go try it. And now we're going to engage in some shameless hyping of upcoming titles, what we call Shout. Mark, why don't you tell us what you're going to shout out today?
High schools with supernatural powers engaging in relationships and dungeon crawling, Caitlin.
Okay.
Yes.
What is it?
Straight into my veins, please. It is called Varlet. It is going to be released in late August. It could be terrible, I don't know, but structurally speaking, it is speaking my language.
Amazing.
If nothing else, I am grateful that the success of Persona has allowed other developers the strength to say, what if we just copied that structure exactly? To which I say, yes.
Please.
More of that.
Please do that. Thank you.
Fire Emblem can be Persona. I'm looking for, like, the Persona driving game. I want the Persona fighting game. I want the Persona Survivors game. All of them can be Persona. Do it elsewhere. This is just another JRPG. Clearly leveraging the Persona framework. That's fine. More.
Nice.
What would you like to shout out, Caitlin?
I am going to be shouting out Kingmakers. I honestly don't know if I'll ever play it, but I am so intrigued by how ridiculous it looks. So apparently you are from the future, and you go back in time to a war-torn medieval era, and you have an arsenal of modern weapons. There is a scene in the trailer where you are in a pickup truck just mowing down medieval soldiers, and it looks so bizarre, it's so weird, and so dumb, and I desperately want to know if it's going to be any good. And it is coming to early access in October this year, so yeah, we'll see what people end up thinking, but it looks so ridiculous. I watched the trailer and I was like, this does not look like my kind of game at all, but I am so intrigued by how silly it is. So, Kingmakers.
Here's my big question.
Yes.
Because yes, I'm seeing this trailer, I'm seeing the pickup truck, I'm seeing the modern firearms being deployed against mounted knights. Does the game know it's stupid?
I desperately hope so.
Because I could see this going either way. Like,
yeah.
Either they know they're doing something that's kind of silly, or they don't. And if they try to play this straight, I don't know that I could possibly enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because this is so facially risible in like a good way. This is high praise.
Yeah.
But if something is doing something risible and trying to pretend as though like like trying to give the same tone. Oh man, I just saw the sequence with the attack helicopter. Okay, like, like if they want to tell it with the same tone of like Game of Thrones or something, no way.
Yeah, no.
Hard pass.
No, hard pass.
But if they appreciate how ridiculous this is, I mean, they have to. Oh, but I've seen worse.
Yeah. It's like, I've seen circumstances where they haven't. So, like, if they play it with, like, this kind of comedic... Like, if they know that it's ridiculous, then I think it could be really great.
Now, make no mistake. I'm not saying that, like, Yakety Sax has to be playing in the background.
Of course,
when you're driving your pickup truck through the horde of foot soldiers. But, again, it's a subtle question of tone. I'm very curious about how the tone is going to be executed, suffice to say.
Yeah, same.
Well, thank you for introducing me to this strange thing.
Yes.
It's supposed to be launching in a few scant weeks. I'm very curious.
Yeah. That does it for this episode of All My Best Friends Are Digital. If you'd like to support free media, you can check us out on patreon.com/ampfad. And we hope you all have a wonderful week and get to play lots of cool games.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach us at allmybestfriendsaredigital@gmail.com. Hope to see you again soon.